Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order. On behalf of the Planning Commission, I'd like to welcome our residents and viewers to this regular meeting of November 12, 2024. On tonight's agenda, we have one public hearing, and after that, we have two discussion items. Before we open the public hearing, we have one housekeeping item to take care of, and that would be two sets of minutes. The first set's from our special work session on October 8th, and the second set is from our regular meeting on October 8th. And we'll take these together. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, both set of minutes are approved. With that, then, we'll open up our public hearing. This is a combined preliminary and final plat for AKIN development. And Jared, you're going to take this.
Yes, thank you, Chair, Planning Commission members. A public hearing was noticed and published in the newspaper for today's meeting regarding a combined preliminary and final plat for a 3-lot subdivision to be called KNOLL, located at 19927 AKIN Road. As the Commission may be aware, a sketch plan of this proposed subdivision was reviewed by the Commission in February of last year. But the applicant is requesting the public hearing be continued to the December 10th Planning Commission meeting as additional modifications are being done to the plans.
All right, thank you, Jared. With that, then, I look for a motion to continue the public hearing to our December meeting.
I'll make motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. Call the roll, please.
Winchidle.
Yes.
Teske.
Yes.
Roddy.
Yes.
Lado.
Yes.
Snowbeck.
Yes.
All right, with that, then, that concludes our public hearings. We'll move now into our discussion items. These agenda items are commission discussion where we will discuss and then provide recommendations to our city council. The first discussion item is the final plat and final planned unit development for the Farmington Technology Park. The applicant is tracked. And Tony, you're going to take this.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council member, or commission members. Yes, before you this evening is the final plan unit development for the Farmington Technology Park. The request is from Tract, and they are requesting the review of said final plat and plan unit development. The Farmington Technology Park property consists of 3 parcels, as the Commission is aware, including the Fountain Valley Golf Course and the 2 former Angus properties. The final plat consists of 3 lots spread over 338 acres of land. Lot 1, Block 1 is 150 acres, and that's the northern portion of the data center campus. Lot 2, Block 1 is just over 2 acres in size. This parcel would be deeded to the city for utility purposes. And then the last lot is Lot 1, Block 2, which is 185 acres. And that comprises the southern portion of the data center campus. This particular lot also is encumbered with approximately about 69 acres of floodplain as well. The plat does show a 75-foot right-of-way for Biscayne Avenue along the eastern boundary of Lot 1, Block 1. That would be for the county road to eventually go through. At this time, Biscayne is not planned to be constructed as part of this development. It would largely be a future county project at some future date and time. The City Council did approve the preliminary plat and preliminary plan unit development for this project on November 4th. The final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat that was reviewed previously. And this is just a copy of the plat itself. As you can see, the 2 large lots are Lot 1, Block 1 and Lot 1, Block 2, divided by 225th Street. The Lot 2, Block 1, the lot that would be deeded to the city is in the very northwest corner of the site, adjacent to Minnesota 50. As the Commission is aware, Tract is proposing this property as a master plan data center technology park. It would include up to 12 data center buildings and 2 administrative buildings. They're proposing at least up to 6 data center buildings and 1 administrative building per lot. Square footage for the data centers on the northern campus up to 1.6 million square feet and up to 933,000 square feet on the southern campus. And again, these are the high ends of what could fit on there. Not saying that that is what is going to fit there. If you'll recall, when we looked at the preliminary plat, there was a representative site plan. Again, that just shows what could fit there. The northwest corner of Lot 1, Block 2 is labeled as reserved for future electric utilities. This would be the potential location of an electric substation, which are necessary for data center uses. Future site plans will be required to be approved by the Planning Commission prior to construction of a data center building and ancillary use on the property. There are 4 anticipated accesses for the campuses. For the north campus, that would be Minnesota 50 and 225th Street West. The south campus would be on 225th Street West and Biscayne Avenue. And then there will be additional turn lane improvements that would be needed as part of this project that have been identified by a traffic study. The second thing that we're looking at this evening is the final planned unit development. As you are aware, we went through a number of these things with the preliminary planned unit development. They include things from setbacks, natural buffers, landscaping, general design standards, building height, fences, electric utility lines, noise, parking, substations, private communication towers, maximum lot coverage, and lighting. In your packet, different things. There's a red line version of the design standards. These are updated from what was previously reviewed by this commission at the preliminary plat stage. There are a lot of enhancements that were made as part of those added red lines. So that's included, and then we also have an ordinance in your packet. We will be approving the PUD as an ordinance. Therefore, these design standards will be essentially codified into the city code versus having a separate planned unit development agreement. We'll kind of walk through the 13 different areas that are addressed in the PUD standards. The first one, as I had mentioned, is building setbacks. This provides standards for the minimum setback of buildings from property lines. It includes a minimum setback of 250 feet from any property line adjacent to residential uses, a 150-foot setback from any property line not adjacent to non-residential uses, a 40-foot setback from the right-of-way of 225th Street. Number 2 is our natural buffers, and again, this provides for a 40-foot wide natural buffer along the majority of the perimeter of the site. With that, they are looking to keep as many of the natural vegetation that currently exists within that 40-foot buffer as they can. That is their intent, is to try to keep as much of that in place as exists today. Landscaping. This provides a type of plantings that will be used throughout the site, allows for the use of rock, gravel, and mulch as an accent material for maintenance areas adjacent to buildings, around utility access points. It also provides for landscaping of parking lots, discusses berms, including berm height and construction timing as well. Number 4 is the general design standards. This includes things for facade standards, screening, etc. Provides for language that provides protection from undifferentiated surfaces on principal building facades by requiring the use of at least 2 of the following design elements: change in building height, building stepbacks, fenestration, changes in building material, use of accent materials, overhangs, use of canopies or porticos, arcades, and variations in roof line, including faux windows, green walls, and other enhanced design elements that could be approved by the Planning Commission at a future date. It also provides language regarding the screening of both ground level and above ground mounted mechanical equipment and structures. The 5th one is building height. Maximum building height on site for principal structure is 80 feet. However, the maximum height at the building setback line is proposed to be at 50 feet. The provision allows for step back approach to the building height. For each 1 foot increase in building height, the building must be stepped back 2 feet. Maximum building height for accessory structure is proposed to be at 50 feet. And the last thing that is provided in this provision is language that any building that is 80 feet in height must be set back a minimum of 400 feet from the property line adjacent to residentially zoned property. The sixth area is fences. This provides requirements for security fencing and perimeter fencing, allows for security fencing up to 14 feet in height and perimeter fencing to a maximum 7 feet in height as well. There's also a discussion there on relocation of fencing and that the developer is willing to work with adjacent property owners to accomplish that relocation if necessary. The next one is electric utility lines. This provision provides language on the need for electric utility lines and their construction as part of the overall project. Then we jump to noise. This provides language that noise generated from the site shall meet the requirements that are established by the MPCA. Provides language that a noise study be prepared at time of site plan, which demonstrates that the applicable noise levels will not be exceeded based on the specific systems and equipment that will be utilized. Provides language requiring the installation of physical sound attenuation measures on any mechanical equipment that is installed at the data center building, located within 1,200 feet of any adjacent residential use under certain circumstances. The ninth is parking, which requires a minimum of 1 parking space for each 1,000 square feet of office use. 10 talks about substations, discusses the need for outdoor mechanical and electrical equipment, and that they must meet or must be fenced and screened. States that fencing around the substation must be set back a minimum of 30 feet from a property line adjacent to a residentially zoned property, and that any substation equipment must be set back a minimum 50 feet from a property line adjacent to a residentially zoned property. Number 11, private communication towers, provides language that these are permitted up to a maximum height of 80 feet and are subject to building setbacks. 12, maximum lot coverage, provides language that there are no maximum lot coverage for all uses built in the designated developable area. And then the last one is a newer one that this commission did not see. It was added regarding lighting. It provides standards for on-site lighting such as the maximum height of pole-mounted exterior lighting shall be 18 feet. Additionally, the maximum height of an building-mounted exterior lighting fixture shall be 35 feet in height. The action that is requested this evening is to recommend approval of the Farmington Technology Park final plat and final planned unit development, or ordinance number 2024-12, contingent on the following, and forward that recommendation on to the City Council. Number 1, a development contract between the developer and City of Farmington shall be executed and security and fees paid. Submission of all other documents required under the development contract shall be required.
All right, thank you, Tony. Before this commission gets into discussion, I'll see if there's any questions for you. I have one, and it's more of a clarification. And you talked about the PUD ordinance. Yes. We had a little discussion earlier on this, and just so that the commission is clear, because this is going to be for all PUDs going forward.
This will be for all PUDs going forward.
And really, it's listing out the differences in a PUD, and then where you're codifying them. Really, can you explain that to the commission?
Correct. There's a couple of reasons why we're looking to make this change. Our ordinance doesn't spell out whether or not you do it through ordinance or PUD agreement. Our past practice has been through PUD agreement. A lot of communities do it one way or the other. Why we're looking to move to the ordinance is to In large part, what it does is it makes it easier to find those requirements, those deviations, those things that are specific to that PUD specifically, versus having an agreement that, you know, that's 5 years old. Where's that agreement? What's in that agreement? How can we find that agreement? Now it will literally be in code in the zoning ordinance to where we can point directly to it. It's easier to find. Just makes life easier for the applicant, the city, and anybody looking to find that information.
Okay. Any PUD modifications, though, will remain the same process?
Same process.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any questions from the commission for Tony?
Yeah, I have one question.
Leon?
Tony, can you describe the difference between this final plat and what a site plan is? Just so we kind of know moving forward how the differences work?
Yeah, the plat lays out the parcels themselves, essentially. The site plan is where we're going to really get into how the building looks, how it's situated on the lot, where the parking is going to be located, making sure that all those things that we identified in that PUD are being adhered to. Okay. That's really the difference. With the plat, you know, if you're looking at it from a standpoint of how do I put this? A standpoint of the specifics, the site plan is where you're going to get into the specifics. Looking at elevations, looking at the lighting, looking at the sound, noise, all of that will come with the site plan. This is literally just setting up the property to where it can be divided, essentially.
Okay.
And this process hasn't changed. This is how, what goes for
Correct.
any and all development within this community, so.
Thanks.
Anything else? Mitch, you got anything?
No.
Okay, we have a couple people from track. Did you have anything to add? If not, get ready for the commission questions, because we've been waiting on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Jacob Steen with Larkin Hoffman. We represent Tract. Tony did a good job of going through the proposed standards as well as the changes that have been made over the past several weeks based on discussions with staff, community members, and the council. The only thing that I would add is regarding the building height. As it's currently drafted, it would be for each 1 foot increase in building height, the building must be stepped back 2 feet. Because we have changed and made a commitment to not having, or to setting an 80-foot building back to 400 feet, that will be changed. For every 1 foot increase in height, the building must be stepped back 5 feet. So increasing that distance with each foot it goes up. And the intent is to, you know, really have that stepped development.
So Tony, this is new. This is a change to what they're working on?
It is new, but it correlates to that 400 foot.
Yeah, it would with 80,
So-
and yeah.
So yeah, and it would be, it's definitely an enhancement to it, going from the 2 to the 5. So, but yes, it is, but again, it correlates to that 400, which is a new one that this commission did not see prior.
Right, and, okay,
And what I would say is under the previous formula, it would
Right.
have been 310 feet.
yeah. I
So
remember that number.
it's just increasing that. And the idea, based on comments from the mayor at council, was that we want to, he wants to encourage having a 50-foot building as the closest building. So this would create that opportunity and essentially encourage the stepping of structures so that you wouldn't end up with just an 80-foot building at 310.
Okay. We'll let the commission mull over that one for a little bit. I understand your logic. I just want to make sure they all agree with it, so. Okay. Anything else?
With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, we'll start with Commissioner Teskey.
I think these look really good. I think it's a step in the right direction to kind of appease the community. I really enjoy the idea around the general design standards of the building and doing some different materials so they're just not all the same building, 80 feet high. The setbacks are great. And introduction of materials that are different or differentiate the buildings. So I don't have any issues with these. I think it addresses the setbacks, the screening, the berming, the lighting was a nice add to see on this, so I don't have any issues or concerns.
I was going to mention to the commission that, just as a reminder and a guide for the commission, a final plat and a PUD should be consistent with the preliminary plat and the preliminary PUD that was approved, and with the changes that were approved by both the commission and our city council. And I'm asking the commission if you could be detailed in your comments to provide, because any recommendation that we make will be going to our city council. So, okay, Chris, anything else?
Nope, that was it.
Commissioner Winchell.
No, just a question, Tony, on the berms. So you're starting at a minimum of 10 feet in height, is that correct? And if they want to go any higher than 10 feet, they have to get approval?
Yes, they would need to get staff approval for that. We'd have to look at a number of things as far as, because the higher you go with the berm, obviously the more space you need to accommodate said berm. So you're looking at not only grading, but drainage as well once you start increasing that overall height.
Is there a reason why the 10 feet versus 15 or 20? I get the cost and the maneuvering of dirt and landscaping, but.
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
I can answer that, Commissioner. So a 10-foot is, pretty standard, and based on the modeling that we've done, that would be generally good to obstruct with some landscaping on top of it, with the understanding that we know that there may be some certain view sheds designs where we want that added flexibility to work with staff and work with the Planning Commission to make sure we do increase that. We feel confident that 10 feet will be sufficient with additional landscaping on top of it.
And I guess my question, follow-up to this is, there's talk that, the neighbors out there, a 10-foot berm isn't gonna be high enough with landscaping. I guess how have you guys confirmed that that isn't gonna be an issue? I would rather see us start at 15 or 20 with the growth of landscaping, that is gonna take time. I don't know what type of trees and stuff we're, talking about bringing in to make that buffer.
Yeah, and I think the intent is that this is the minimum, based on the modeling that we've done on the representative site plan. We do feel confident that it will screen the buildings as proposed. That being said, we don't know exactly what those buildings are going to look like. We want to be able to work with the Planning Commission. And like Tony said, this is exactly the kind of questions that will be in front of you based on the exact specific proposal at site plan review. And we do have one of the additions to, and I think Tony touched on it, but one of the additions is that any berms would be required to go in before the foundations commence, so that even that foundation work would be screened.
Sure. And then just one other question, as far as the fencing, the perimeter fencing, the residents are gonna have an input, I see, as to what type of fencing, the 3 different types of fencing that potentially could go in there. Now, I guess on that part, the question was, why don't we move the fencing in on the other side of the berm so they don't have to look at a fence out their front door?
Yeah, and it was based on our discussions, we have, so there's a couple of reasons. I mean, first, many of those neighbors have attached their fence to the perimeter fence, which is actually located a few feet into the property. So we want to give them the opportunity to, continue to have their dog run around.
Sure.
We also need the ability to screen and protect that for security purposes, for liability purposes. It's not going to be a lighted area by design. We want it to be a natural buffer. So the risk is that it would effectively become no man's land. From a liability risk, that would be a major concern. So, and again, preserving those backyards.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, it's just a concern, if you had it on the other side of the berm, I get people's fencing and yards there. But it's also applicable to put no trespassing signs there to prevent people from going onto the property. Because I do know it was raised, the question was raised, if a kid's ball goes over your fence, is the security guy gonna go get it, or,
Well,
8
the
o'clock
security,
kind
and the security fence would actually be inside of the buffer. So that would,
Yes.
so there's two fences, right? There's the perimeter fence, which, you know, we'll build a nice fence that, you know, essentially replicates what's there now, or better. And then the security fence itself will be 40 feet in. So, you know, and that could potentially be a higher fence, and we'd anticipate that no balls are going over there.
Okay. Never know.
Yeah, right. Maybe
right.
some golf balls.
Thanks, that's all I have for now.
Anything else, Phil?
Nope.
Thank you.
Commissioner Leto?
Yeah, I have additional question about the fencing. I mean, I don't know that all of the properties are currently fenced, but I'm just wondering how much, I mean, I'm assuming that the property owners know what their property line is. Do you know how much they're gonna lose of that kind of open space behind their homes? I'm just curious, it's like, how far back will it be going from where the current perimeter fence of the golf course is?
You know, I don't have that exact number. I think it varies kind of from place to place. You know, the existing fence was put in, you know, I think in a few feet, but it's not consistent, right? So it could be 2 to 6 feet.
Okay, all right. And then the noise mitigation, I think I'm generally okay with it, but one thing I think hasn't been addressed, I'm curious about, is the low frequency noise. Because I know that's a big concern, and I just wanted to know if we've addressed that at all, or how does that work? Because it's one thing to do the levels of everything running, but the low frequency noise, I think, is something that's really of concern to everyone. And have you guys talked about that or addressed how that might work? Or what the effects of that might be?
Yeah, you know, so there's a couple of thoughts. So first, mitigation is the number one goal. So we do have a number of mitigative steps in place. That will be reevaluated at the site plan review stage as we know what specific equipment is going to be proposed. We'll pair that specific equipment with the noise study, and then you'll have an opportunity, and there is some language that allows you to create additional mitigative steps through that site plan review process. So the idea is that right now we would be speculating, you know, if there was specific equipment that we were going to place, we'd be able to address that now, but we don't know what the orientation of the site will be or what that specific equipment will be. And our hope is that with these guidelines here, with staff's input and the Planning Commission's input and that noise study data, we'll be able to address those and make sure we do have those mitigative steps in place.
Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you, Lon. Commissioner Snowbeck?
On with the berms and the fences, what's the threshold for changing it from 10 feet to 15 feet or 20 feet? Like, how does that process look? Like, would it be community members that are concerned about 10 feet not being higher? Is it the city, the planning commission? You guys feel like, just walk me through what that would look like if we're gonna change it from 10 to a higher height.
Yeah, you know, so I think that what we will do is, as we get to that site plan review stage, we'll know what those buildings look like first and what that orientation is. We would look at, and presumably the Planning Commission has the authority to ask for viewshed studies. So we would have a viewshed study from those individual points around the perimeter and from the neighbors' properties, and then we could model that. If it looks like at that time a 10-foot with landscaping isn't going to be sufficient, it can either be a proposal from the applicant or it can be a requirement of the Planning Commission. So it would be a collaborative process to make sure that we're addressing the screening appropriately and that we have sufficient berming and landscaping.
Okay. So it'd be collaborative, I mean.
Right, it would fully, and it would be a back and forth process through the application as in the site plan review.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mitch?
Oh, good.
You know, the commissioners, you did a great job. You asked good questions, you know, detailed questions, and I appreciate that. Leanne asked the $1 million one and the difference between platting a piece of land and a site plan. And as Tony did a great job explaining it, site plans are details. I mean, that's where we're going to come in. That's where we'll do studies like Mitch and Phil talked about. You know, we're going to see what's going to happen. We're going to see renditions of buildings. We're going to see everything else. This is, as Tony mentioned, this is the platting of the land. We've approved, or not approved, we sent a recommendation to our city council. They've approved it. This isn't inconsistent with it. I like the modifications. I appreciate what the council did in modifying when following through. I'm a little concerned that we talked about G and it was still on when it went to our city council. Because when I talked to him, I go, it can't be there. But it was, and you did. I appreciate you taking it off. But I know we talked about it in a meeting about not doing that, but, you know, about putting those things in the middle of the property if they have to be there at all. So I appreciate that. And I understand your business model from Tract and how you're gonna do it. Are you any closer to finding out who's gonna be there?
Wish I
And you
could
don't have
tell
to
you.
answer it if you're not gonna, but I'm just asking.
No, I can't.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't know today.
I didn't think. you were
We
gonna.
know, you know, we as we've discussed, we know kind of the class of operator, and you know, as over the coming years, you'll find out more.
Well, and you lead right into my second question. Your timing, you know, what is your anticipated timing of this project? If it goes through and council approves it?
Yeah, you know, I think it's intended to be a phased project, right? So full build out could be a number of years, could be 6-7 years. I would anticipate that the way we have it structured right now is we could start grading relatively quickly. You know, we could start grading in the spring, potentially. So I would anticipate that work will start in the next year to 2 years. I mean, I can almost guarantee that, but in terms of the full build out, you know, there's a lot of moving parts, and we're working with the city on delivery of utilities, and it'll be sequenced, and there will be plenty more opportunities for the planning commission to review, no doubt.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure, and our city council.
Correct.
And when we do that, we invite the residents, so. And, you know, you mentioned grading may start sooner rather than later, and part of your commitment is keeping, from what I understand, is keeping as many of these existing trees minus ash that you possibly can. So how do you, if you start grading already, when does staff or somebody, commission, whoever's gonna see the tree count and what you're gonna try to save?
Yeah, so there is a grading process, a preliminary grading permit that will be submitted. Now, what we did do is amend these standards to be clear that we can have access points through that natural buffer, but where the natural buffers are proposed, the intent is to preserve those natural buffers, so that 40 feet.
Okay.
And the intent is not to plow those down.
I appreciate that, okay. You know, Commission, to me, it is consistent with the recommendation of the preliminary plat and the preliminary PUD that we recommended to our city council and they approved. I do see some of the modifications to the development standards. I appreciate that. I think our council and our staff did a great job with the applicant to get those modified. So you know, if we're gonna do it, I would feel we need to make a positive recommendation to our city council. So let me get my papers out. So then in front of the commission is a recommendation to our city council for approval of the Farmington Technology Park final plat and final PUD with an ordinance. In addition though, and I want to remind the commission, is we are modifying the PUD ordinance process. I will go through it. I anticipate it'll be a better process, better for those that are going to use it. For us, it should probably be pretty transparent, but we're going to be approving that also. There's one contingency, and I want to ask Track right now, do you agree with everything that's in the staff report tonight? Because it's going to go to our city council.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, we're comfortable with those conditions as well as the change that we mentioned from 2 feet to 5 feet.
And I'm fine with that. Does anybody on the commission disagree with that? And I will ask staff to review it before it gets to our city council, and if you have a concern with it, please have our city council modify it.
Absolutely.
Okay, anything else to that? No. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion with one contingency. Is there a motion?
A motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? If not, call the roll, please.
Teske.
Yes.
Roddy.
Yes.
Plato.
Yes.
Snowbeck.
Yes.
Winchell.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we'll move into our second discussion item, and that's cannabis legislation and regulation. Ugh. Tony, you're gonna do this along with Rita, or
I am going to tee it up for
for
Rita.
her? Okay.
All right. Mr. Chair, Commission members, we have Rita here with us again to continue our discussion on cannabis legislation and the needed changes to our zoning code that we're looking to achieve hopefully by the end of the year. We have some draft language that we want to run through this evening with you, and with that, I will turn it over to Rita.
Great. Nice to see you all again. I know Beth was here last time, and she prepared, based on the conversations that you all had at the joint meeting, what we understand to be the draft standards. So I just wanted to walk through them this evening, answer any questions, know where we still might have concerns. So the draft standards, I should say, skipped over. Oh, I can use, I just realized we didn't do
Did I
this.
not turn that on for you?
No, you didn't. That's okay.
Sorry.
It's
He's just
It's
testing you. He does it all the time to me too.
So the three areas that we want to discuss this evening are the definitions, the uses in the districts, and the use standards themselves. And then I'll briefly touch on next steps.
And Rita, can I interrupt you just
Yes,
for a
of
minute?
course.
Because Commissioner Snowback, Commissioner Winchell wasn't with us when
Oh.
we discussed this, so.
Okay.
You know, I'm sure they've read through it, but they may have additional comments, but
Sure.
from that
I think
night.
you were here though that when we came the last time. I
Yeah.
remember having all
Yeah.
of you at the dais. So that helps.
But we modified it a little bit with the
Okay.
council too.
All of a
so.
sudden I got worried that you didn't have the background because I kind
No,
of skipped over for the benefit of the public.
Them are our two experts, so we'll rely on them.
Okay. I suppose I should take a step back, just for everybody who might be watching at home.
Yeah.
In 2023, the state legislature determined that it would be appropriate for the state to allow cannabis use in the state of Minnesota. In 2024, they made some adjustments to those, and that's when we have information from the Office of Cannabis Management on the regulations that local governments can put in place relative to cannabis. So the goal for all communities is to have cannabis regulations in place by the end of the year. Technically, January 1st is supposed to be the timeline where more activity can happen with cannabis. There's been a little bit of activity this from July through the end of this year, just with some specific applicants that can start working through opportunities. I don't know that I've heard as of late that things are moving quite as fast as that January 1st timeline, but it is still good for cities to have these rules in place. As we talk about these, we do anticipate potentially, usually when these things are new, there are some adjustments that may be made. So we may have to have more discussion next year. But we are doing what we can with the information that's available right now. So we had a conversation with you in October to kind of give you the foundation to talk about that. And then Beth was with you at the joint meeting, talk about it again. And I know there were some changes that were made. And so this is where we understand us to be landing. And I think tonight is about, are we in agreement? Do we have any concerns? Are there new questions that may have arisen? And then from there, staff is working at kind of what the next steps would be. A discussion with the council again, or preparation of public hearing materials so that you can work through the process in December. I think for sure the December process is probably anticipated with a public hearing and then action by council, just to keep us on that timeline. Ultimately, we have included 5 definitions. The first 3 are specific to cannabis. So one is about cannabis cultivation. And just as a reminder, cultivation can be indoors or outdoors. The second is about cannabis or hemp manufacturing. What's important here is I think the last time we saw you in October, we had more definitions because we were having more uses. But after the conversation with you, and I think it was confirmed at the joint meeting, we're just including processing, packaging, wholesaling, testing, treatment, transportation, or delivery, all as kind of one use. We were going to treat them all similarly anyway. So cannabis or hemp manufacturing includes all of those elements. The next one is cannabis retail, and that's just the licensed establishment that can sell. products, and then lower potency hemp edible retail. To contrast that with cannabis retail, it's important that we have two different definitions because of the fact that the products are sold in slightly different ways between the two, and there's different regulations. So we do want to specifically identify them between those two types of uses. And hemp products, just a reminder, that is a wide ranging of things. So there's edibles, there's drinks, there's liquor. So hemp edibles can come in a lot of different forms. And that was some of the conversation we had with you in October, is that we may want to make some differences with hours of operation because there are different ways, in particular that is made available for use. So when we looked at uses in districts, this is where we would put it specifically in the zoning code to identify where uses are allowed. Generally, communities try and apply where uses would be allowed, similar to how they would be allowed if it was a non-cannabis business. So as an example, cannabis cultivation outdoor, allowed in the agricultural district. As we move to indoor cultivation, you might have a greenhouse, which may be more agricultural in nature. You might have it more in an industrial type looking building, so that's more industrial in nature. And you can see overall, the city at this point is recommending use of a conditional use permit. So that would mean you would still see any of the types of activities that might be proposed and have an opportunity to review and make any comments on those. As we move through, indoor cultivation of cannabis was felt to be appropriate in the agricultural, the business district, and the industrial district. As we move to manufacturing in the B3 and industrial district, and then as we look to retail, really focusing in on the business districts and the mixed use districts. And that also includes the lower potency hemp. So again, these match the definitions that we just had and reflect the conversations that we've had over the last couple of meetings on where things would be allowed. In terms of standards, my understanding from the joint meeting, I was not part of that, but my understanding was the general consensus is that we wouldn't have buffers from schools, daycares, parks, or residential treatment facilities. We had prepared the maps in October. You had reviewed those maps, we had made some changes, and then the conversation was ultimately determined that that wasn't necessary. We did continue
Rita, can I interrupt
Yes,
again?
of course.
Just so that Phil and Mitch understood, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you were all there, but the rationale for that is we don't exempt it in any liquor type things. I think Leah mentioned the only place we have any restrictions are sexually oriented businesses. So to try to make it as consistent with the alcohol, whether it is or not, that was the rationale on not, because when we did all those circles and all those zones,
Yeah, it was confusing.
it limited it so much, and it might allow one district to do it, but you have a very similar district in a different location of our community that wasn't allowed to do it. So, and why should you, the thought is why treat them differently? If they're the same area, same business, same zoning district. Is that accurate, Tony?
Correct, yes. It was the thought that we don't have those for tobacco and liquor. So really, what's really the difference in this instance? But yeah, that was the logic behind removing the buffers.
So I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I appreciate the additional
Mitch, you have any
context.
follow-up on that?
Yeah, just kind of referencing the staff on that, it seemed like you guys came in supporting having buffers. Is it after you saw the maps? Is that what helped you? Explain to me what helped you change your opinion on that.
Largely, it was Council and Planning Commission that ultimately changed my opinion on it. But yes, after seeing those maps and the amount of area that they took up, compared to what was available, I just don't know that it was feasible to do it, because we do have to allow them we have to have a space for these type of uses. Mm-hmm. We cannot just outright say, no, we don't want them. And the way those maps ended up, I don't know that we really had a good spot for them if we were to do the minimum, even the minimum. So,
Just to kind of follow up on the question, would smaller buffers allow that to areas that, you know, that would open up to more logical areas in our city? Did that discussion happen? I just, not being there, I'm just trying to process everything.
We didn't resize buffers, but, because it was so extreme, I thought, and there wasn't even a buffer that we didn't include, if I recall. What was that one? I can't remember, but it was pretty intense. The circles, they overlapped considerably.
Yes.
And some more significant, had a broader bubble or, area than others. But
Yeah, I was here for all that, so I get the thought process, just wondering how you
Yeah.
came about to going
And
from
I was-
all to none, yeah.
it was largely the discussion that we do not have buffers for tobacco and liquor right now, and to treat it any different would be hard to do.
And if I recall, the council's direction on it is that, again, because you don't have it, why over governance this versus that, type of thing. Let's try to treat things equally. It seemed fair,
Yeah.
The one thing I would add, sorry, Tony, the one thing I would add is it also starts complicating it when you're trying to set buffers from, say, a daycare. And what would happen in the future when a new daycare came in someplace or located someplace, and I'm just using daycare as an example. And what would you do if there was already an establishment within that buffer area? So it just, the actual enforcement as it moved forward became more and more complicated as we started to talk about it out loud. And then again, those numbers, those buffer numbers were very arbitrary in this because we don't already have those kind of buffers built in. So it was a combination of all of that and just talking through the complexities when the reality is there's only so many of these that ever would be licensed here anyway.
Well, I appreciate Chair Rodney and your explanations. It's just, I just want to walk my head through the process, as in being in schools, and it's important to me that we make good choices and decisions for our entire community, including our children, right? So I need to hear it from you, yeah.
Absolutely.
It was an argument because I think everybody had the kids on their mind when we were talking about it. I mean,
It
the
was
schools and
probably the
daycares.
most discussed thing
Yeah.
at that joint session were the buffers.
Yeah.
So it was thoroughly discussed.
It even brought out a new idea that I'm not sure if it's been addressed or going to be addressed, but I think, Leah, you brought it out about maybe you need some kind of use type restriction, What if it's allowed here, somebody walking down the street and they're standing next to the door of a daycare center or something? That's what I took it from, and I don't know if we're there yet, or, maybe Phil and Gary in your business, you know how to handle that, but what do I do if I got a granddaughter that I'm walking by with? I don't want them in cigarette smoke either, but this may be even, different than that, and I certainly don't want them in that.
Yeah, we did spend some time talking about public use restrictions, which are also a part of this. It's separate though from like the business owner themselves and their licensing and their registration. But I heard from council and planning commission at that joint session, not necessarily like full support for a public use prohibition, which you're allowed to do, but that you do want to kind of continue to talk about it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an old person, but that's my thing.
Could you create an ordinance prohibiting marijuana use
In public,
in public, on a sidewalk, in a park?
yes.
Yeah.
Yep,
Mainly, a few communities have looked at it specifically in parks.
Yeah.
some have done half, not in a bad way, but half measured or custom to just parks. But the state statute's very broad on public places.
Yeah, there's a definition of public places and what it all includes.
And
So you can
it's pretty
choose.
vast, so.
Except for schools. I don't understand that. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a good question, though, Phil. I mean,
Well, I think that makes the most sense, if you want to be able to control the use around schools or even a business district or parks, you create the ordinance and mold it to what the citizens and everybody wants,
My understanding is council left it with staff to, at some point in the future, review and develop this if necessary. We're not going to certainly, start it, but, no, I don't discuss this with my wife ever, seldom, but her question to me was, what if we're sitting at a park, kids on a swing, and somebody comes and it's their ability to sit on the bench and start smoking right next to their stroller or whatever, you know? And I said, I don't know. I'll ask the smart people about that. So,
It becomes a larger policy decision
Yeah.
that council has to
I'm sure.
really weigh in on if that's something we want to do. I do believe Kelly, our Park and Rec director, has at least had conversations with the Park and Rec Commission regarding parks. And at this point, they haven't chosen to move forward with that. But doesn't mean that that couldn't, again, come up in discussion and potentially something in the future be brought forward.
Yeah, I believe our discussion Monday won't be real lengthy. Maybe it could be mentioned again to see what their interest level is and
We certainly
if they
can.
want the staff to pursue it or not. I don't know. I mean,
Yep. We certainly can bring that
I
back up.
appreciate that. I'm sorry to interrupt you again, this time for a
You're
long
not
time.
interrupting, this is why we're here.
All right.
We're good on buffers? Okay, awesome. One element that we did maintain through all of these conversations is that the city should establish a retail limit. So that would limit the number of retail businesses that could be operational in the city. What the standard from state is no more than one business per 12,500 residents. You can increase the number, but you have to do at minimum that number. And with applying that, that would be a maximum right now of 2 businesses. So that's something that we would establish as the limit. And so that's in the standards and would be something that would be covered in the zoning code itself. So that's one of the things that's interesting about cannabis is parts of it is licensing, parts of it is public use, and part of it is zoning. So that is something that still would be part of the zoning.
And
Relative,
just, sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
again, so that's just for cannabis retail, not for hemp,
Right.
cannabis standards, so.
Is hemp unlimited then?
In theory, yeah, there's no explicit authority in the statute for a city to establish that. That's not to say it couldn't be, you couldn't come up with a reasonable time, place, manner restriction around that, but just in the statute, that's only for cannabis retail businesses.
Yep. Thank you.
looking on to hours of operation, I alluded to this earlier in my presentation. The hours of operation that were recommended for cannabis retail uses would be permitted between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and then 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. on Sunday. But the lower potency hemp retail uses are slightly different. If you remember the conversation we talked about on and off sale and trying to kind of link some of these to the liquor licenses. So the idea, usually lower potency hemp retail uses are things that might occur in other places than just the retail establishment. Let me back up. I don't think I explained that very well. The cannabis retail uses will only occur in a cannabis retail business, which means it's easy for them to know what their hours of operation are. Lower potency hemp edible retail is a lot more complicated because there's a lot of different types of uses. So there might be stores, there might be a brewery, there's all kinds of different places. So to make it a little bit easier, we tried to match off-sale and on-sale liquor so that if you were in one of those establishments that has later operating hours, you don't have to remember that just this particular product has different hours. I hope that was a better explanation.
I understood it.
Yep.
Hemp hours match the state requirements, so that's already something that's established by the state. Relative to cannabis use standards, as a conditional use, as I said, you will be reviewing any conditional use permits. The idea is that all cannabis uses would need to meet the standards, and we included in the packet the actual standards from that section of the zoning code. So this is the criteria that you currently use for conditional uses. And so this would be something that you would be using to evaluate against if there was any conditional use. It is something to be aware of. This is something that we would want to think about carefully if there was a reason why you wouldn't allow it, but it does provide you the provision to walk through each of these to make sure that the location does make sense. And if there are conditions that would make it better for the health, safety, and welfare, that maybe you could address those. And then there are things that people are concerned about typically with cannabis, so we just wanted to kind of identify those. One is that you have, in the conditional use standards, it talks specifically about noise, because sometimes that is something that people brought up. And so there is a way that you can address that if that is of concern specifically. So that's why it's bulleted, is that that is something that you already have these. It's just, these are specific things as we work with cannabis in other communities that come up as a concern. Similarly, odors are also something that is of concern, and so you do have that already, and so something you would be able to measure against. And then lighting. So it's felt like the conditional use standards you already have address a lot of the types of issues that people have been concerned about, and that adopting new standards doesn't really help. They would still need to be relatively broad, because of the fact that there's a lot of differences that you would have to address. So it's felt like these are things that you can look to, and if there is an issue, if you issue a conditional use permit and something is happening, these are things you can go back to revisit that conversation. If a use comes in and it is disturbing the neighboring properties, you would have things to go back to, so you could revisit and address things that might have those impacts, which is also part of the process with a conditional use permit. I would anticipate, based on conversations we've had in other communities, odor is one of the biggest things that we keep hearing about. But that's something that they should be taking care of on their site, but if they're not, that's something that you would have the ability to go back and address. And that's what the provisions are with a conditional use permit.
So that's after the fact, that's not pre-approval,
Well,
though.
you could address them proactively, but there are standards already in statute that they have to meet.
Okay.
So it was kind of, I'm just saying that you can do it proactively through the process, but also it's nice because you actually have these in place, so if it's not working, you would have the ability to go back and revisit it if there was an issue. So you probably do it on both sides. Or there'll be no problem altogether, and they will be here, and it won't be an issue. But since it's new to all of us,
Yeah.
it's hard to know how this will go.
Did you get a question?
Yeah, I got a question. So
Sure.
this is an uneducated question, but aren't there like tobacco places where you can buy a cigar and smoke a cigar in the establishment? Could that be similar with cannabis use? Like, isn't that a thing? Like, there's places to go and buy a cigar and smoke it. Would that be permissible at this retail store?
Yeah, I don't want to step on Rita's toes, but yes, so micro businesses is one of the 13 or 16 kind of business licenses, and they could be endorsed at the state level for on-site consumption.
And tell me more.
And say
What does that
more.
mean? Do you see where I'm?
Yeah, I know where you're going. Just
Yeah.
like a cigar shop or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. So within this license of these two establishments, right, they could have that capability.
Yeah, it could have, and we're distinguishing this from hemp, right? Just cannabis.
Yeah.
Yes, cannabis micro business, I believe, is the only one that can have on-site lounges where customers can use there. And they still have to abide by the Clean Air Act, right? So I don't know what kind of product they're going to be using. But yes.
I think in your statement, you answered my next question. So there could only be a possible 2 sites where that could occur? Or can there be a lounge that does not sell cannabis and they could have it, a lounge that's not selling cannabis?
OCM is not authorized to have a business that's solely, like, it's non-retail, it's just like a room.
Yeah.
I mean, that's outside of what I've read from OCM's powers, so.
I'm
But
sorry about
I
that.
don't know business-wise how that,
Yeah,
how do they make any money if you're bringing in your own weed and,
Yeah.
cannabis and
Yeah.
smoking it versus.
I'm just trying to figure out in my head what this all looks like, right? Because it's all new.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I should say OCM they haven't even started like putting out their official rulemaking yet. So this is in flux, but communities like yours are working to get a good framework in place, but it would be a joke to say that you won't be seeing this again, so.
It's gonna change tomorrow.
So, yeah, that's my next question then is, we can come up with all these standards and new legislation comes out before January 1st?
No, that would not happen. Session's starting
Yeah, that's,
Oh, are you talking about rulemaking?
Yeah.
Oh, a distinction only an attorney could love. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm like, no, that can't happen. So rulemaking, OCM's moving through the process. I don't know if they'll be publishing rules before January, if they'll be official. They do have draft rules online, though, that are posted that you can review.
So we could approve all of this, and then the new rules come out, and we'll be able to make adjustments to our own?
You will have to.
Yeah, right? I
We'll
mean-
make recommendations, the council will
Yeah.
eventually do it. And we talked about this at years and years ago when alcohol was first
Yeah.
allowed. You know, there was.
Were you around at that
Well, I
point?
probably was.
yeah.
But there were people sitting in a room, probably having the same, see, I always get called old. Called
Well,
old.
just the way you're
Wasn't that
talking.
long ago.
I didn't take it as that.
How
But,
was prohibition?
Dirk, it was not that long ago when we did breweries and tap rooms and distilleries.
that's
I was
true.
around, so
Yeah,
it wasn't that long
That's
ago.
not too far. But, yeah, my sense is that, you know, whatever commission's sitting up here and whatever staff's sitting over there, there'll be modifications.
Yeah.
You know, maybe more than you want, but they'll have to be done. And I think it's gonna be a learning process. Hopefully for Phil and Gary, it's not too hard a learning process as you get into it. I mean, you guys are the ones that are gonna be out there on the front line. So I feel for you guys, but, it is what it is, and we'll do the best we can today, and then we'll have to worry about tomorrow.
Concern is it'd be hard to roll back things,
No.
right? I
Well,
mean,
not if it's the right thing.
I would, and Leah, correct me, but I would anticipate that we're going to generally know about those things in advance to have time to make the changes before. It's not,
Okay.
it's a little different than like, we make a change and it's non-conforming. This thing is not fast moving.
Yeah.
Just confusing because the information is not out there.
Yeah.
So I think we'll have time to adjust.
thank you, everybody, for
Yeah, that's right.
answering my questions.
We want to have these conversations.
Yeah.
You never know. Let's see. Okay. Any other things on conditional use before I go on to the next?
Are other communities, most of the other communities using the CUP process for their approval, or what are they using?
Honestly, the ones we're working with are all over the place. There is no clear path that I could tell you. Some are using buffers, some are using smaller buffers for certain things, some are excluding some things, some are really getting uptight about it. Oh, that was not a good word. Really concerned about it. I only say that because size of community, sometimes I'm surprised at how much time we spend on it, and they're doing all kinds of extra rules if they can. Some are deferring to the county and having the county take charge. It's really all over the place. Generally, the idea of kind of the classes like we have is generally kind of the mode that planners have gone in terms of having classes and trying to make it as similar to how you regulate today. That's similar. Some are just allowing it permitted by right. Some are doing conditional. It kind of also depends upon the feeling of whether you can do conditional uses or not, and there's difference of opinion. That's the challenge of not having clear rulemaking, is that it's hard to know actually where our limits are. I don't know if you guys all have anything to add. Yes, okay. Let's see. So additional standards, we did want to note that you could add additional standards for certain or all cannabis businesses. We are seeing some on security, so this is an example. Security measures to deter and prevent unauthorized entrance into areas containing cannabis or cannabis products shall be implemented and maintained as shown on a city-approved security plan. Just note that that's a nice thing, but I don't know that any of us know what a security plan is. So that's always the danger, is Tony and Jared will have to evaluate whether it's a security plan with help from others, but that is something that you could do. Also, some people prohibit outdoor storage. Those are kind of two additional ones. It was feeling like your CUP covered noise and odor. These are things that aren't covered, so if you felt it was helpful, certainly things that could be added as additional standards for cannabis businesses, if that is felt like it's needed at this time.
Would that conflict with the first discussion we had tonight, or part of this is in relation to tobacco and alcohol? I don't believe those are required to have some of this. So, I mean, are we, again, being selective on the different product? And maybe should we be? I don't.
Yeah, that's a great question. and one that you all get to contemplate. No, but I mean, something to keep in mind is the city, and this is in the statute, the city will receive a completed application from OCM, and they're required to supply security plans to OCM as a part of their application process. So not including it doesn't mean you won't see it. Adding it as a condition, though, maybe that gives some peace of mind, but again, implementation's kind of a question mark on that. So I think it's wise to show you guys what other people are up to.
I would note one thing on the outdoor storage that strikes me is that alcohol and tobacco, I think, are different than cannabis relative to outdoor storage, meaning we're generally not talking about a type of product that uses outdoor storage or that might have outdoor storage if you think about it. Just given, like here in Minnesota, we don't really have tobacco producers that I'm aware of. And so that might be, that one to me might be worth thinking about because, and alcohol, you know, if you have breweries, you're doing some things outside, but really the kettles are inside and they're protected. So that might be something that is different, especially when you have cultivation. Honestly, I don't know if they would do that. Maybe?
Tony, I'm not sure the process you're planning for next Monday night, but if they're not gonna bring it up, can you add it to your list to ask them about it?
Absolutely.
And the other one that I'd consider, I'm thinking about is just, the city's planned involvement.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
City's planned involvement, you know, what are they gonna have? Are they gonna? Yeah, that's what I'm getting. Both the muni for that, and what is the local munis? Are they going to have some of the hemp products? I don't know. Maybe they already do. I don't know.
You're talking about a municipal liquor store?
Well, that's
cannabis
one.
store.
I'm
Which
not sure.
muni? Okay.
Yeah, and then you know, just so that you know, it's not a secret. Our residents need to know this if there are or aren't. I mean, some people are going to use it, some aren't. But just things like that to get their impression right away. And
I do know that, or it's my understanding anyways, that if the community does decide to do a municipal store itself, that does not count towards the two
Retail establishments.
retail establishments.
Right,
We would still
yeah.
have to allow 2 additional, so
yeah, just be
something
good.
to consider.
It'd be good to know for everybody.
Yep.
I guess we might as well talk about it.
So do you feel like either of these two, because if you feel like they're valuable, maybe we come back on next week with
Yeah.
more language or more examples. So
We
that's
just-
why I'm curious of
We
what
just
all
asked,
you
I think
think.
we should include them and see, get the council's opinion.
I think it'd be good to get the opinions.
Yeah,
Okay,
I like the security plan, and I got thinking to myself, okay, if you go to a store, I was in Quick Trip the other day, and then they're pretty accessible. I mean, yeah, for the people that are working there, you know, but a bad person can get access to them also. I suspect, you know, there's alcohol right there accessible, there's no security plan, but, you know, again, you guys convinced me there's other reasons why to have that.
okay. So, yeah, I was just thinking for outdoor storage, just seeing what kind of language people have, if that's something that is worth thinking about. If it's just prohibition or there's any other standards. Okay. Our perspective is those are the standards that we're seeing. Any other thoughts, concerns, questions, things that we would address?
I guess I would look to Phil on what we just talked about, these two. What are your thoughts?
No, I think it's good to look at it. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, you know, the cultivation part of it. You know, obviously I would assume there's gonna be some sort of security measure around the growing operation part of it. I don't see why there wouldn't be. And I think it's important to look at even just the businesses themselves, like, are they gonna, you know, security wise, have it behind the counter, or have it laying out like a bag of chips, or what is the plan for these?
Right, and the state is establishing their standards, but I'm just saying there are standards that they will have that they have to meet.
Yeah,
But
and I'm
yes.
curious to know
Yep,
what those are, you know,
Yep.
is it?
Yeah. Gary, you get to enforce this. Any thoughts?
I'm just laughing at street cop Phil that just appeared.
Well, I'm just saying.
I thought it was funny. You
Want a Mountain Dew too, or what?
Okay.
My question would be like, there are security measures at liquor stores. What does this mean? Like, is this like there's cameras, right? They have, I mean, what are the security measures? Like, are there liquor stores that don't have cameras? I mean, ours do, right? Correct?
Oh, I'm fairly certain we do.
Yeah.
I would venture to guess that 99.9% of any retail store.
Yes. Yep.
And as Leah, I think, mentioned, I think as part of their application, they would have to have a security plan submitted as part of their application to the OCM anyway. So we would likely see that information when it gets submitted to us anyway. So we could always include that as part of any CUP application that would come before this commission.
Yeah, just briefly, the statute, so this is 342.14. It's a list of a number of things, and one of them says, a copy of the security plan, including security monitoring, security equipment, and facility maps, if applicable, except an applicant is not required to secure a physical premise for the business at the time of application. But if they have a property and they're talking to us, their application to OCM has to include a copy of that security plan.
So
I think a security plan, I think it's pretty basic, like, you know, you have an alarm system or a lock on your door is about, that's a security plan to some of these businesses.
Yeah, a lot of the merchandise is under lock and key. Like, it's a different type of retail experience. It's not like going to a retailer and just buying a bag of chips. Like, it's a different process.
I mean, I don't see any problem if it's in the OMC, including it in our conditional use, right? I mean, I think we want to see.
I think just get the right verbiage, I think is
Yes.
what.
You want some
that's
sort
looking
of security
for.
measure, you don't want it to be nothing.
Yeah, you know, it's not over the top, but it's also the lowest of the low either. Whatever, could you guys come with a recommendation on those? I mean, we wouldn't.
We'll do our best.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Can I ask another question that I'm still curious about? So if someone wants to do individual growing in their own home, is there any part of code that deals with that, or is it just licensed through the state?
It's not licensed. They can do it by right, up to 8 plants.
So there's a limit on the amount they can do.
And so,
And it's not
That's
supposed to
not-
be visible.
Yeah.
That means.
and
Yeah.
there's no regulation on that then, right? So they
Not through
have
the
just by
city.
right? So if like, oh, I have 10 and they're never gonna figure that out, like, or, no.
Yeah.
That's concerning to me, but that's different. I
Yeah.
just am curious because the other thing that I thought as far as the daycare, and this is like totally out there, but my brain went to, okay, I have an in-home daycare and I'm gonna apply for plants at the same time. And I'm like, who would do that? But somebody might. And so I don't know.
They won't have to apply
That's
for it,
just-
correct? I mean, as
Yeah,
long as
No,
they're
they
under 8.
wouldn't, yeah,
The daycare license is gonna go through the county and.
yeah.
We're probably starting to frown on that.
Well, you would think so, but I don't know, somebody might.
Might not
try
see it
and,
in their
like-
closet.
Yeah, I don't know, that just,
You're
That's a
moving through one of the
concern,
many
but-
stages of grief that many localities have been.
yeah, I just don't, well, and because of, my career and things like that, of course, there's issues regarding mold and additional water use and electrical and all that stuff too, so.
Any other concerns that we should
appreciate your
address?
patience with us tonight.
This is why we do this. It's the good conversations, though.
And it will shorten our discussion with the city council Monday evening.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're trying to condense it, so we have as much on the forum as we can for them, so that, because they got a busy night too, I'm sure.
You're doing your job. Your job is to work through these things and bring up good points. So
Very good.
that's good. Any other things, though, before I move on? It's a really tough slide. It's the next step slide. So my understanding is Monday, do the joint meeting. And then with that, we'll create the ordinance language, which we already have it in, we just need to take it from what we have into an actual format. And then you would, if everything feels comfortable on Monday, then we would go towards a public hearing at your December 10th meeting and then adoption on the 16th. So I think so far we haven't had, so far it's been good, but we'll see if there's new things.
Sorry.
And again, we get the opportunity to hold a public hearing, so we'll get similar questions, and Tony will have the right people here for that public hearing that can answer the questions if staff can't and we can't, so, all right? Thank you very much.
All right.
All right. That concludes our agenda. Tony, did staff have anything else to add?
Nothing, sir.
Commission, do you have anything to add? If not, I'll remind our viewers and our residents, our next regular meeting is, again, December 10th. And with that, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
One second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're officially adjourned. Thank you.